Good morning. This is your daily briefing from the New York Times. Today's headlines for Wednesday, July 29, 2026. I'm your host, and we have a packed edition today, from escalating conflict in the Middle East to a shifting immigration enforcement strategy, a Senate confirmation that fell along party lines, and stories stretching across politics, business, technology, science, culture, and more. Let's begin. We open with the top story. The United States and Saudi Arabia have carried out joint airstrikes on Iranian proxies in Iraq, and the Iranian military says it has targeted American military assets in Jordan. This marks a significant escalation. According to the latest live updates, the joint U.S.-Saudi operation signals a widening of the conflict, drawing more countries directly into the fighting. The Iranian response, striking U.S. assets in Jordan, represents a direct attack on American forces by Iranian military units, not just proxies. This tit-for-tat raises the risk of a broader regional war, with Iraq and Jordan now hosting strikes on their soil. The situation remains fluid, and the administration has not yet detailed the specific targets or the legal basis for the strikes, but the coordination with Saudi Arabia suggests a deliberate effort to present a united front against Iranian influence in the region. At the same time, a new front has opened in the Trump administration's immigration enforcement drive, this one at the nation's airports. Federal agents in plainclothes are arresting foreign citizens with expired visas as they pass through check-in counters and arrival gates. The sweep, documented in at least 15 airports in recent weeks, has ensnared spouses of American citizens, tech workers, and others, many of whom have active applications to remain in the country legally. According to a Times exclusive by Hamed Al-Aziz and Miriam Jordan, this tactic vastly expands the pool of people subject to deportation. Some arrests have been quiet, others have played out in full view of travelers. Immigration lawyers say the administration is exploiting a gap. People who overstayed visas but are in the process of adjusting their status are now being treated as immediate removal priorities. The move has sparked alarm in immigrant communities and among employers who rely on high-skilled visa holders. It also raises legal questions about due process for those with pending applications. In Washington, the Senate has confirmed Jay Clayton to lead the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The vote was 51-47, straight down party lines. Clayton, the former U.S. Attorney in Manhattan and a longtime ally of the president, shed Democratic support during his confirmation hearing when he refused to clearly state that Joseph R. Biden Jr. won the 2020 election. That refusal became a flashpoint. Democrats who had initially signaled willingness to support him walked away. Clayton takes over from Bill Pulte in a role that has seen its significance wane during the second Trump administration. But the installation of a loyalist atop the intelligence community carries implications for how intelligence is gathered, shared, and potentially politicized. Turning to the world stage, Ukraine has struck an Iranian cargo ship in the Caspian Sea, an unusually direct encounter between two countries that have been on opposite sides for years. Ukraine says the vessel was ferrying military equipment between Iran and Russia. Iranian officials call it a commercial ship and accuse Ukraine of killing a sailor. Tehran has threatened retaliation. The strike underscores the deepening links between the war in Ukraine and the broader Middle East conflict, with Iran supplying drones and missiles to Russia. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha said the attack was a legitimate target. Iran's foreign ministry vowed a response. Analysts warn this could pull the Caspian, a body of water bordered by 5 nations, into the orbit of both wars. In Japan, rescue teams are racing against time after a 6.8 magnitude earthquake struck Kumamoto Prefecture on Tuesday, killing at least 13 people. More than 200 aftershocks have continued to jolt Kyushu, the southernmost main island. Firefighters, police, and 4,600 military personnel are working to reach people trapped in collapsed buildings, including a shopping mall and a paper factory. The quake hit in the early hours, and the full toll is still emerging. Officials warn the window for survival narrows with each passing hour. In Germany, the far-right Alternative for Germany party, the AfD, is seizing on a deadly attack at a Berlin Pride celebration to reshape the fall election narrative. A woman was killed and 29 injured when an assailant, who authorities say once tried to join the Islamic State, drove into the crowd. The AfD's Berlin leader issued a statement that said nothing about LGBTQ+ rights, focusing instead on the attacker's Islamist ties: protect Berliners from violent Islamists. Analysts say the calculation is clear: pivot the conversation to migration and security, terrain where the AfD polls strongly. The attack has also exposed tensions within the coalition government over asylum policy and surveillance powers. Back in the United States, Ruby Rippey, a former aide to Gavin Newsom, has broken a 2-decade silence about their affair when he was mayor of San Francisco. In a first-person essay published by Vanity Fair, Rippey, then his appointments secretary, details a relationship that rocked City Hall in 2007. She has rarely spoken publicly since. The essay arrives as Newsom finishes his final year as California governor and lays groundwork for a possible 2028 presidential run. Rippey writes about the power imbalance, the political fallout, and the personal toll of being at the center of a scandal that was, in her words, the talk of San Francisco. In St. Paul, Minnesota, the police chief has filed a sexual harassment complaint against Mayor Kaoliher in her first term. Chief Axel Henry, who has led the department since 2022, told city officials in March about a series of incidents involving the mayor's behavior toward him and other officers. The city has hired an outside law firm to investigate. The complaint is extraordinary, a top law enforcement officer accusing the city's chief executive of inappropriate conduct. Details remain sparse, but the investigation is underway. In South Dakota, Governor Larry Roden has clinched the Republican nomination for a full term. Roden, a rancher, ascended from lieutenant governor last year when Kristi Noem left for Trump's cabinet. He overcame a crowded primary that included the state's sitting congressman, the Speaker of the State House, and a businessman, Toby Doden, winning a runoff on Tuesday. The Associated Press called the race. Roden is now the strong favorite in November. In politics, Dr. Anthony Fauci's pandemic diary has been made public by his Republican critics, offering an unfiltered, sometimes startling look at the private thoughts of one of America's most polarizing public health officials. The entries, published by the New England Journal of Medicine, are raw typos and all. One from May 21, 2020, notes the global death toll, then veers into a Washington Post profile. Big front page article about me appeared in the Washington Post. Very flattering. The situation with my national and international fame is explosive and real. The diary reveals a man acutely aware of his celebrity, navigating political pressure, scientific uncertainty, and personal exhaustion. His Republican nemesis released it to undermine him. Instead, it humanizes him, showing the strain of leading the nation through crisis while under relentless attack. Also in politics, the farewell of Lindsey Graham. Peter Baker, who first met Graham covering Bill Clinton's impeachment in 1998, writes that the senator's political evolution, from John McCain's closest ally to one of Trump's most vocal defenders, both captivated and confused his old friends. At Washington National Cathedral, the contrast was stark. When the first of the three amigos, McCain, died, the service felt like a repudiation of Trump, who wasn't invited. When Graham's turn came, Trump led the tributes. The shift mirrors the transformation of the Republican Party itself. And in Ohio, a bitter family feud threatens a safe Republican House seat. Representative Max Miller, a second-term Trump ally, faces domestic abuse allegations from his ex-wife, Emily Moreno, daughter of Senator Bertie Moreno. Moreno accuses Miller of abuse against her and their 2-year-old daughter. The allegations have spilled into court filings and public statements, turning a primary that should have been a formality into a potential vulnerability for Republicans in a tough midterm year. On the business front, the Trump administration announced Tuesday it will end a Biden-era program that subsidized Medicare drug premiums for the past 2 years. Millions of Americans 65 and older could face higher monthly costs for prescription drug coverage next year. The decision comes as cost of living concerns dominate the midterm landscape. For 2025 and 2026, the federal government gave health insurers payments to keep premiums stable. Ending those payments means beneficiaries could see sticker shock when shopping for plans this fall, a political risk for Republicans. In media news, Ross Douthat, opinion columnist at the New York Times, is leaving to join 60 Minutes as a correspondent for its 59th season, premiering September 13. He's part of a wave of new hires that includes Sebastian Junger, Gianna Taboni, Trevor Phillips, and former CBS Evening News anchor Norah O'Donnell. The move comes amid turbulence at CBS News and signals a push to refresh the venerable news magazine. On Wall Street, the legal talent wars just escalated. Gibson Dunn has hired William Savitt, co-chair of rival powerhouse Wachtell, Lipton, Rosen & Katz, along with 5 other litigation partners. Savitt has led Wachtell since 2023. His departure is rare. Co-chairs of elite firms almost never jump to competitors. It reflects a boom in deals and rising legal complexity that's putting pressure on traditional loyalties. Andrew Ross Sorkin and Lauren Hirsch report the hiring underscores just how fierce the competition for top litigators has become. In technology, Mark Zuckerberg came out swinging against Anthropic and OpenAI in an interview with The Times. Without naming them directly, Meta's chief executive said leading AI labs that develop technology in tightly controlled, closed ways risk centralizing power and narrowing public access to transformative tools. He argued for more openness. The remarks reflect a deepening philosophical split in Silicon Valley, closed versus open development. That debate centers on open weights, a middle ground where model parameters are released but not the full training code or data. Kate Conger, Mike Isaac, and Megan Tobin explained that open weights allow researchers and developers to build on existing models without full transparency. It's a compromise, but one that satisfies neither the open-source purists nor the safety advocates who want tight control. Also in tech, a 7-year legal battle ended with eBay agreeing to pay $56 million to settle claims by David and Ina Steiner, a Massachusetts couple harassed by eBay's security team in 2019. The campaign, orchestrated by senior executives, included surveillance, threatening deliveries, and psychological torture aimed at silencing the Steiners' newsletter, which criticized eBay. 3 former executives were implicated. eBay acknowledged the settlement but said the conduct is not representative of eBay's culture. The case raised profound questions about executive accountability in Silicon Valley. In New York, Governor Mikie Sherrill is on a political tightrope after the discovery of up to 6,600 non-citizens on the state's voter rolls, what she calls a software error. On Tuesday, she defiantly refused a Justice Department demand for the personal details of those affected, calling the request legally baseless. The Trump administration has seized on the error to amplify its voter fraud narrative. Sherrill, a Democrat who took office in January, is trying to fix the problem without feeding the political fire. Also in New York, federal investigators found that leaders at the New York State Museum in Albany compelled a subordinate to falsify timesheets, improperly drawing down nearly $598,000 in federal grants meant for a geological survey between 2020 and 2022. The Interior Department's Inspector General published the findings after Times reporting. A former payroll employee, Brian Slater, had blown the whistle. The fraud scheme directed staff to bill time to the federal grant for work not done on the survey. And in a ceremony that echoed history, Edwin Raymond was sworn in as New York City's new sheriff, a role many New Yorkers don't know exists. The sheriff's office, with about 150 deputies, handles civil enforcement, evictions, and property seizures. Raymond, a retired lieutenant and former whistleblower, took his oath in a ceremony honoring Frank Serpico, the 1970s anti-corruption detective. Serpico himself attended. Raymond's appointment signals a focus on accountability in an office long overlooked. In the arts, a law firm hired by Interlochen Center for the Arts in Michigan, where Jeffrey Epstein is said to have encountered some of his earliest victims, has released a report documenting decades of sexual abuse by teachers, staff, trustees, and others. Dozens of alumni came forward with accounts ranging from the 1950s to the 2010s. The abuse went far beyond Epstein. The school commissioned the investigation after alumni complaints. The findings are disturbing and systemic. At the movies, Spider-Man: Brand New Day arrives with Peter Parker finally an adult. Alyssa Wilkinson writes that the series has always been about the terror of growing up, the body changing, powers emerging, the weight of responsibility. Tom Holland's Parker asked Doctor Strange to erase the world's memory of him at the end of No Way Home. Now, the question is whether the franchise can mature with its hero. And in a clash over AI and creativity, the Writers Guild of America East has withdrawn its sponsorship from Urban World, a New York festival showcasing Black and multicultural films, after the festival added a section for movies made with AI tools. Festival founder Stacy Spikes called the Guild's move deeply disappointing. The union has been outspoken on AI's threat to writers' livelihoods. The split highlights a widening fault line in the creative industries. In publishing, AI-generated books are flooding the market, and big booksellers are taking different approaches. Historical romance writer Jess Michaels, with 117 novels and 10 USA Today bestsellers, says sales have collapsed. The glut of the AI work makes discoverability very difficult, she says. You're talking about directly pirating my work, putting it into an engine so that you can produce a Jess Michaels-type book, and then glutting the market with it. It essentially erases actual authors. Retailers are struggling to filter the deluge. Meanwhile, the 2026 Booker Prize longlist includes Marlon James's The Disappearers, his first non-fantasy novel since winning in 2015, alongside new works from Douglas Stewart, Elizabeth Strout, Gwendolyn Riley, and Emma Cline. James's novel, about an anti-gay hate crime in 1980s Jamaica, is among the year's most anticipated literary releases.
And Emily Hackney's memoir, All That's Unseen, offers what Jamie Quattro calls a portrait both loving and clear of Appalachia.
Hackney, an eighth-generation Appalachian, opens with a scene at Deliverance Christian Church in rural Virginia, 5-year-old Emily watching congregants fall to their knees, weeping and speaking in tongues.
It's not an elegy. It's a reckoning.
In food, Kevin and Lex Finch have opened Arthur in Greenpoint, betting New Yorkers want more than steak frites.
The restaurant aims to avoid the trap of mindless bistro fare, but does it thrill? The verdict is still out. In Sunnyside, Queens, Masa Madre is making what Nikita Richardson calls New York's most unforgettable conchas, an artisanal Mexican bakery featured in the first episode of A Little Treat with Nikita Richardson. No reservations, under $20, pure joy. And off the menu, the team behind Serbo's is diving for oysters at Zigzag, a raw bar in the heart Serbo's Fly-Il bar chain. Tin sticks to cold food while waiting for utilities, Keepers offers tavern fare downtown. The restaurant scene keeps shifting. In science, Anthropic's Claude Mythos preview has discovered new attacks against weakened versions of cryptographic algorithms that protect online banking, private communications, and state secrets. The finding underscores the cybersecurity risks of ever more capable AI. Researchers say the model found novel ways to break encryption standards and pervasive use across the internet. In marine biology, scientists in Mexico have used underwater ultrasound scans to confirm pregnancies in 3 giant manta rays, the first time this has been done. Giant mantas are the largest ray species, yet where they give birth remains a mystery. Joshua Stewart of Oregon State University says the technique could finally answer that question. The species is endangered. And in Costa Rica's Taboga Forest Reserve, a portable testing station called Capuchin AI, equipped with a touchscreen and facial recognition, is helping scientists study capuchin monkey intelligence in the wild. An alpha male named Poppy learned to touch the screen for dried banana slices. The device could transform primate cognition research by bringing controlled experiments into natural settings. In health, a new CDC report finds hypertension during pregnancy rose 73% between 2016 and 2024. 1 in 10 pregnant women in the U.S. had high blood pressure in 2024, up from 1 in 17. Hypertensive disorders are among the leading causes of pregnancy-related death and disease, and the U.S. maternal mortality rate already exceeds that of other wealthy nations. For those in midlife, loosely 40 to 60, experts say the habits you build now shape how you age. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, dementia, their seeds are sown in middle age. Margie Lockman of Brandeis calls midlife the ideal time to make changes, not only to benefit you in the present, but also in the future. 9 evidence-based recommendations range from strength training to social connection to hearing protection. And on food monotony, eating the same things every day, some do it for weight loss, some to avoid meal planning. Experts say it can simplify nutrition but risks nutrient gaps and disordered eating patterns. Variety matters, but so does sustainability. The key is intentionality. In travel, Rome is having a pizza renaissance. Pizza al taglio, the traditional Roman snack sold by weight, has been upgraded with toppings like wine-braised meatballs and cumin-scented lamb. The best slices are found in neighborhoods across the city. To mark Route 60's XS Centennial, a Times journalist rode its full 2,448 miles over 14 days on a motorcycle. What's become of America's most storied highway? A mix of kitsch, decay, resilience, and reinvention. And beyond Amsterdam and Venice, 6 European canal cities offer charm without the crowds. From culture in Hamburg to sweet confections in Aveiro, Portugal, the magic reveals itself as you drift down uncrowded waterways. Harlem, just 20 minutes from Amsterdam, is a standout. In real estate, a botanical illustrator extends what the Times calls a seductive invitation to learn the subtleties of the 600-odd plant families on the planet. Her home is a living archive. In fashion, Ryan Murphy's new prep school thriller The Shards has Kaya Gerber and Cindy Crawford reliving 1980s Los Angeles at the premiere. Murphy's love story fueled nostalgia for 90s New York, now he's targeting the Wayfarer era of Southern California. Will it land? And James Rutherford, 34, builds a 1970s menswear wardrobe on the cheap. It's really a reviled decade, you know, as far as men's fashion is concerned, he says, which means vintage pieces are affordable. A brown eBay suit, a flamboyant blue dagger collar shirt, a leather satchel. He wears it all near Blackfriars Station in London. In obituaries, Lily Yokoi, the acrobat who dazzled on a golden bicycle, died at 96 in Tokyo.
She performed balletic, gymnastic tricks in high heels in circuses, theaters, on The Ed Sullivan Show, and at Harlem Globetrotters halftimes. Lily Yokoi began where all the other trick cyclists left off, said one impresario. Gunther von Hagens, creator of the polarizing Body Worlds exhibits, died at 81 in Heidelberg. He developed plastination, turning corpses into posable figures caught mid-dance, mid-run, mid-coitus. Tens of millions saw his shows, religious and human rights groups condemned them. He had Parkinson's since 2008. And Kigo Higashino, best-selling Japanese mystery writer of more than 100 novels, died at 68. The devotion of Suspect X brought him global fame. He was the first Japanese author nominated for an Edgar Award and a Dagger Award. Colorectal cancer. In the magazine, the Heritage Foundation, bastion of American conservatism, architect of Project 2025, is consumed by an ideological and generational civil war. The crack-up reveals deep fractures on the post-Trump right. Online, videos of rocket explosions have become punchlines, occasions to mock billionaires. Chris Almeida traces the shift from tragedy to meme, from Succession to SpaceX livestreams. Failure, once solemn, is now content. And Heidi Julavitz wanted to predict the weather without an app. She spent time with forecasters, storm chasers, and indigenous knowledge keepers. In an era of freakish storms, the old ways reading clouds, wind, animal behavior are gaining new urgency. Finally, the opinion pages. Bret Stephens warns that Jewish terrorism is also a threat to Zionism, a blunt warning for Israel. Ezra Klein talks with Ben Wickler, former Wisconsin Democratic Party chair, about what the Democratic Party actually is mechanically, structurally, and what it could be if reinvented for this era. James J. Sample writes about Ken Juppy, an Alaskan bush pilot charged with importing a six-pack of beer into a dry village, a case that could determine whether the Supreme Court treats ordinary people with the same care it shows corporations. Jared Bernstein and Jim Parrott assess the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, good law, potentially transformative, but what happens when it meets a seemingly indifferent administration? Thomasella Friedman calls Zoran Namdani's threat to arrest Netanyahu a waste of a rare bridge-building talent. New York, with 750,000 Jews and 750,000 Muslims, needs a mayor who connects, not divides. Chrystia Freeland, former Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, writes, "Blame Canada used to be a South Park joke. Now it's US policy. The battlefield is economic." And from Kiev, Irina Madra, Mykola Yurlov, Taras Semenyak, and Mark Ellis argue that Putin saw a gap for aggression with impunity. 36 states and the EU have now signed an agreement to create a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine, the first such court since Nuremberg in Tokyo. Justice, they write, proceeds slowly and cautiously, but it does proceed. That's your briefing for Wednesday, July 29, 2026. Thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with the next edition of today's headlines.